Hi, friends, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Anessa, and I am an indie author from Toronto, Canada, and I publish under the pen name of A.N. Sage. I write mostly in fantasy, sci-fi, and all things paranormal and magic. And in today's video, we are actually going to be going over some of my tips for writing a novella. So stick around so you can see what it takes to write these shorter novels that actually take quite a bit of work. Hello, and happy almost holidays. I cannot wait for Christmas and New Year, and I especially can't wait for next year to start because I have so many projects ready for it that I'm super excited to launch and get started on. But in today's video, as I mentioned in the intro, we are talking about writing a novella. Next week, actually, I have my own novella coming out, so I thought it was the perfect time to do this video to talk to you about some of the tips that I used when structuring it and writing it and how I kind of took on the whole project as a whole. Um, so the novella that I have coming out, it's closer to a novel, to be honest with you. It's about like 38,000 words, which is still novella length, but on the higher range. If you don't know, a novella is anywhere between 5,000 and 40,000 words. So mine is hitting it close to a full length novel, but it is still a novella. And it's in the Shadowhurst world. So that's coming up next week. I will update the link, like a link with it below after it launches. So I'll update this video next week after it launches so you can check it out. But in the meantime, we can talk about some tips for you to write your own novella, or if you're interested in figuring out where to start when it comes to novella writing. So to dive into it, the first thing you really need to do when you've thought of writing a novella is you need to figure out the purpose of it. So why are you writing it? Why would readers want to read it? And how does it relate to your library as an author? Is it a prequel to a series? Is it a sequel to a series? Is it a standalone? These are things you really need to know because it's really going to help you with structuring the novella, and it will help you push the plot forward a bit better if you have this idea ahead of time already. So for like, as an example for mine, the one that's releasing next week, it's a prequel novella. It's a prequel novella to the first book, Witch of Shadows in the Shadowhurst world. And it follows characters that some of which are in the actual books, but some that are not. So it actually follows Billy is the protagonist in Shadowhurst, but the novella is following her mother. So it's kind of a deeper look into how the High Coven works, how the world works, what the deal is with the FAVE person. We're not going to give away spoilers that will come later in the book, and how that all came about, and gives a bit more of a deeper history and understanding to the world prior to the full books. The reason I chose to do a prequel novella is because I've had a lot of readers reach out to me and ask me for just like more on Billy's mom, because when we meet Billy in the first book, we find out her mom is actually imprisoned in a magical prison by the High Coven. And so a lot of people wanted to know that story. And while I knew in my head that Billy's mom was going to play an important role in later books, that wasn't happening for a while in the series. And so this was a good way to kind of like give the readers a little bit of that tease and that preview, and just give people more on the world. It's also, if you're doing a prequel novella, it's a really good way to get new readers into your series. So mine is going to be completely free everywhere. It's not going to be on Kindle Unlimited, just like my other books, but it will be free across the board, like Wattpad, Barnes and Nobles, Kobo, Apple, everywhere. And it's just a good way to get people into your books. It's a faster read, it's a faster write. And so it's a less work than writing a full-length novel, but it gives you a great way in the sense of marketing your series if you have one. This for a sequel novella, let's say you're doing one of those, that's more for your existing readers. So once you already have a pretty good readerships and people are really liking the world, a sequel novella is a good way to kind of give them not an alternate ending, but something more after they finished and they're kind of craving more. A sequel novella can also be a really good way to connect your full series with a spin-off. So that's something to think about as well. And a standalone pretty much speaks for itself. It's just a short little thing. It could show off your skills as a writer, how you write, the kind of characters people can expect from you in the future. So that's one more way of looking at it. After you kind of figure out exactly what the purpose is of this novella you're writing, what you really want to do is plan it out. I mean, I say this for every single one of these videos. I'm sure you're like, just shut up. But you want to plan it out because with a longer novel, there's really no limit. I mean, there's a limit on words, like you're not going to be writing the next War and Peace, but hopefully, I mean, maybe you are, so who knows. But like in fantasy and that kind of genre, they're a little bit shorter, but still there's no limit. Like you can keep going until you've told your story. With a novella, there's a cutoff point, right? Otherwise it becomes a novel. And so you really need to plan it out to make sure that your story is succinct and that it really follows the plot properly, and that you're hitting all those beats at the right times, but still hitting that maximum word length, right? So planning is crucial to novella writing, more so than a novel, for sure. The other thing that you want to consider when writing your novella, or planning it or plotting it at the beginning, is that your conflict really needs to appear a lot sooner. You don't have as much time, like you can't take 2-3 chapters to describe a setting, to describe like your characters, to build those arcs, because everything is so condensed. That conflict really happens to happen, like it has to happen almost immediately, so that your reader is intrigued in it. Because at the end of the day, you need to use the rest of your novella to explore that conflict and to offer more interest and to explore your characters. And you can't do that if, as you're starting to write, all you're doing is building up to a conflict that comes much later in the book. Because in a novella, like let's say in a novel, your conflict comes like 3 or 4 chapters in, that's going to be like a quarter of your book in a novella. So it's really, it's prime real estate in novella writing for your conflict to be immediately, if not almost right up front, right? Almost starting with it really is a good idea as well. So another thing you might want to think about is minimizing your characters and your subplots. Again, you have much less space to play with. And so if you are introducing like 10 characters into this tiny space, into this tiny, really condensed kind of world, it's confusing. And not only is it confusing, but none of them are going to be fleshed out. You're going to have characters that are very basic, very two-dimensional, because you just don't have the word capacity to stretch out their arc developments as much. So you want to minimize those characters. You want to have like one lead character, maybe another additional character, and then the rest are kind of mentions. Like as an example, in my book, while the world is very large, and in the actual books there's like tons of characters, tons of secondary characters, extra characters, everything. In the novella, we only have Billy's mother, Beatrix. We have the fey creature. Again, no spoilers. We have the High Coven. There's 4 priestesses in the High Coven. However, for this particular one, I'm only concentrating on one, really more in depth, because otherwise, too many characters. And then we have one sidekick friend character. So it's fairly minimal. So 40,000 words, that's not bad. As well as the subplots, right? You can't have a million subplots in the novella because you just won't be able to talk about them all, or explain them as much. It's like trying to tell like a joke, but then there's like 10 other jokes crammed into it. Like nothing's going to be funny. So you really want to have your subplots like very, very controlled. You might have one minimal one, and you might have none, and depending on the length. I mean, if you have a 20,000 word novella, there's really no need for a subplot there. Your main plot is the plot. It's only 20,000 words. I mean, it's a short story almost at that point. And then the next tip that I have is your pacing. So I personally, the way I write is my pacing at the beginning of novels is slower, and then it builds up and builds up and builds up. With a novella, that doesn't work. Your pace has to be fast throughout the whole thing, specifically for genre novella. So anything in like sci-fi, fantasy, like anything super genre related, that pace has to hit like bam, 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 bam. Like you really, it's spitfire, right? Because they need to keep turning the pages, and they will keep turning the pages. Your chapters are shorter to start with. The whole thing is shorter, so they're already used to that mentality. Like the reader already knows that they're going to be reading through it fast. But if they're reading through it fast and nothing's happening, it's contradictory, and so it doesn't set the right mood for what you want to accomplish. So a faster pace is definitely something you want to think about when it comes to novella writing. And then the last thing that is kind of like a good little trick or tip that I do when I'm writing novellas is I do the one sentence check. So if you haven't heard of a one sentence check before, basically it's kind of like a log line. So when you say you have like a book, a log line is like a one sentence, an elevator pitch of how you would describe the book, right? So it's like who the character is, what the conflict is, and like what their goals are, right? Like it's just like a quick overview. So I do this for a novella as well. And what I try to do is I try to describe this novella in one sentence. And the reason I do this is because if it gets too complicated, or if there's too many things I'm trying to cram into the sentence, and if I take those things out, it's just not interesting or enticing enough, then I might not have a novella on my hands. What I might have is a novel that requires a lot more work and just more fleshing out of the story, etc. You should really be able to describe your novella, because it's so short, in one sentence, really. Like you should be able to say, like, this is the character, this is what they want, this is what's getting in their way. Now, if you're trying to do that and what you're getting is this is the character, this is what they want, but they also want this, and then they have this love interest that's kind of getting in the way, but also this other thing's getting in the way, and oh, forget it, there's also this big bad that's trying to like attack them and destroy all their goals and dreams. That's not a novella. I mean, if it is, it's a long one, and it's not a deep one, because there's just too much to cover. There's too much to cover to make it relatable enough and realistic enough, because fantasy or not, or whatever you're writing, it still has to relate to your reader, and you can't do that if there's so much going on, right? And so doing this one sentence check is a really good way to, after you've done the first draft, to really or even before, even when you're planning, but I suggest after you've done the first draft to just kind of make sure, if you have not overwritten, or if you don't have a book on your hands or a full novel, right? And then you will have an idea. Let's say you did the one sentence check and you were like, oh my god, there's too much, this can't be a novella. So now you have two options, right? You turn it into a novel, or you cut some stuff out, and it gives you like a temperature check on your draft, right? Which is a good way of thinking about it. So yeah, I mean, I think those are like my main tips, like the main overarching tips for writing a novella. There's little things that you could do, small things throughout, like your sentence length and alternating those a bit more than you would in a novel, shortening your sentences again to make it more succinct, faster paced, etc. The way you describe action could be a little bit different. So you might be relying more on the actual action in certain parts to speed up that action than describing it in full detail, and maybe cutting out some of the sentences, like the senses of that your character would experience when you're describing them in some parts, and then adding more in others. So there's a lot of really small, intricate little nuances that you can take on when you're writing a novella. But as far as what the real like do's and don'ts are, I think this list kind of covers the majority of what I would want to say. I will link a couple of references as well below in the description for other articles and books and stuff that I'll find afterwards on writing a novella, and some things that I used to read a lot before I got the hang of what it is to write one. So that will be linked below. And yeah, I hope that this was useful to you if you are thinking of writing one. They're super fun to write. I mean, I had such a blast writing this one. It really like flows out of you, and it was so interesting to play with a faster plot and a faster pace, because it's different for me, right? It's not how I usually do things, and so that was really interesting to kind of play around with. So I hope that this helped you in some way. We're really close to Christmas. I am going to do this video and the next video on Wednesdays, so that not to hit like the big days of the holidays, like New Year's and Christmas Eve and stuff. So we're going to release those on Wednesday. So next Wednesday, we're going to do another video. I think this one is going to be another one of those screen share videos, because I am launching a cover design business in under Cauldron Press in the new year, and so I thought it might be fun for you guys to see like a time loop, like a sped up time loop of how that process like happens to me for one of the covers that I designed. So I think we'll do that next week. And then I don't know what we'll do the week after. I'll figure it out. It'll be in the new year. So if you want to see more videos, obviously subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, turn on the bell notification. It really helps other people discover this channel as well. So if you want to help out other writers that might be interested in this content, then definitely do that, or just let them know somewhere. And I really appreciate it. I love doing these a lot more than I thought I would, and I'm really enjoying this weekly session that we have, and you guys mean so much to me. So I hope you have an amazing holiday, amazing Christmas if you celebrate Christmas, and that you get everything you want from Santa, i.e. books, and whatever else you might want, books. So I'm wishing you guys all a Merry Christmas, and I will talk to you all next week, right before the year ends. Bye. Stay magical.